Welcome to This Week in Hastings Headline History, where we take a look back at what was making news in Hastings, Florida over a century ago. These are stories directly out of the pages of the Hastings Herald, which was published weekly in the early 1900s. So sit back and enjoy as I share with you a few of the stories from the October 10th, 1919 edition. Constable Charles E. Green has raided another moonshine still. Another alleged moonshine plant was successfully raided last Thursday by Constable Charles E. Green and S. Bird. This still was located in the dense cypress swamp near Turner Island, where Joe Petty's alleged illicit outfit was discovered last week, and was of the larger type, having a capacity of about 60 gallons with a worm 15 feet long. The plant, though crude in construction, seems to have been operated with success by the moonshiners, enough of the joy water having been discovered to establish beyond a doubt that the still has even been running recently. 2 or 3 10-gallon cans found near the plant showed evidence of having been containers for the liquor, but they were in such an unsanitary, rusty condition as to render them totally unfit, even dangerous for use. It is remarkable that the shine contained in these miserable receptacles has not caused an epidemic of ptomaine poisoning among the users of the beverage. About 200 gallons of the mash was destroyed by the raiding party, and a number of gallons of the white lightning was poured into the water. As evidence of the fact that illicit distilling is being carried on in the immediate neighborhood, Constable Green brought 5 gallons of the whiskey into Hastings and is exhibiting it in front of Coe's drugstore. Frank Parker talks about road conditions down the East Coast. Mr. and Mrs. F.J. Parker and family arrived Sunday evening from a motor trip Mr. Parker made down the east coast of Florida. When questioned by a representative of this paper, Mr. Parker stated that the Dixie Highway is in good condition all the way up the coast as far as the sand stretch north of the Tomoka River in Volusia County. He says it seems to be the policy of all counties to keep the roads in repair, as even small holes are not allowed to go long without attention. Florida castor bean growers are not to lose all. In a decision just rendered, the Board of Contract Adjustment of the War Department has taken jurisdiction over the claims of growers in Florida who, in good faith, attempted to raise castor beans for the manufacture of castor oil to lubricate plane engines during the war. This information will be particularly gratifying to about 6,000 Floridians who planted a large acreage and who, in consequence, suffered equal to those of the growers of all other states combined. The principal cause of the failure, as determined by investigation, was the unacclimated inferior seed imported by the government and furnished for planting purposes. Castor beans had not been grown for commercial purposes in the United States for about a generation, and no domestic seed was available for planting the large acreage desired by the War Department. It became necessary, therefore, to import a cargo of the seed from India to meet the emergency, but the latent defects of this seed were not discovered until too late to avoid serious loss to the contractors and growers. As soon as the disaster was apparent, Senator Duncan U. Fletcher, as a member of the Military Affairs Committee, interested himself in the matter and finally succeeded in having certain amendments incorporated into the bill to provide relief in cases of contracts connected with the prosecution of the war, which made it possible for the Secretary of War to take jurisdiction over the castor bean claims, since which time the senator has kept actively behind the matter to its conclusion. It has been stated authoritatively that these claims involved more legal points than any other claims presented to the department, but after many conferences with numerous officials, Senator Fletcher was able to satisfy them that the growers were entitled to reimbursement the same as the manufacturers of any other war munition. Approximately 50,000 acres were planted to castor beans in Florida, and it is estimated that over $1 million will be returned to the contractors and subcontractors as the result of the decision the board just rendered. Composes new song. H.W. Beatty, a member of the faculty at the State School of the Deaf and the Blind, has written the words of a song entitled "To Wilson." This has met with such favor and has been so highly praised and appreciated that George Graff Jr., composer of such famous songs as Till the Sands of the Desert Grow, or As Long as the World Rolls On, and I'll Change the Shadows to Sunshine, has written the musical accompaniment. The song has been brought out by the World Music Publishing Corporation of New York City and may be ordered separately or in conjunction with various other musical publications brought out by that concern. The new song is being extensively advertised by the publishers, and Mr. Beatty's many friends here are proud of the success he has achieved. Most important campaign started. The headquarters of the Florida Anti-Tuberculosis Association yesterday began its active work preparing for the Red Cross Christmas Seal Drive, which is to penetrate every section of Florida. Letters from all parts of the state indicate an aroused interest in the work. Special effort will be directed towards effective organization in the smaller communities, as the leaders declare there will not be a hamlet in the state where the cause will not be taken. The campaign of education in combating the White Plague has proved most valuable to the nation, and people generally now realize that tuberculosis can be cured and it can be prevented. Will enforce auto license collections. Sheriff Boyce announces that he intends to enforce the collection of automobile licenses, and he calls attention to evasions of the law which will not be countenanced. The sheriff says that a dealer's tag will not suffice for the operation of a car and will not be a state license tag. Tags cannot be recognized as the state requires a tag lifted from old cars to be used on new cars. Thus, if a person buys a new car, a license must be secured for the new car, and the old license must remain on the old car. But if the old car changes owners, a permit will be necessary to use the tag, and a fee of $1 is charged for this permit. The law provides that duplicate tags must be displayed on the front and the rear of cars, and the person carrying only one tag on a car is liable to the penalties of the law. Water supply improved. Since the new well has been connected with the waterworks system and the old well shut off, a decided improvement in the quality of the water has been noticed. The new well is supplying a softer water, which seems to contain less mineral. Fashion representatives here. Miss Jenny Stapleton and Miss J.P. Fordyce, representing the Standard Fashion Company of New York City, have been at the Hastings cash store for the past few days exhibiting their line of sample stock. Raising funds for basketball equipment. The high school girls have started a movement to establish some form of athletics as a healthful and entertaining diversion for the winter season, and are now busy raising funds with which to purchase a basketball outfit. As an initial attempt at the money-raising line, they have arranged with C.M. DuPont, manager of the Auditorium Theater, to sell tickets for the Lyceum course that will be booked for the local movie house sometime soon. This course embraces a series of shows, and the manager has generously agreed to split the profits of the first night show with the girls. The members of the basketball committee are, as a consequence, actively engaged in selling tickets, and their worthy cause should be well patronized by local residents. The Hastings Herald had more than stories you'd find in a modern newspaper, but also local notices that were more of a social report, a way to know what was going on in town and in the personal lives of its residents. Here are a few from this edition. W.B. Edminster home. W.B. Edminster, county tax assessor, arrived home on Sunday from Europe after an absence of a year, during which he did splendid work in the YMCA service. Mr. Edminster volunteered for service when the war was raging, but did not get across to France until hostilities ended. He, however, found a great field for his work, as the Army of Occupation was in need of such men. Mr. Edminster traveled extensively over France and Germany. He is resting now in Elkton at his farm for a few days, but will soon be mingling with his friends. Motored from Palatka. Lawrence H. Tucker, accompanied by his daughter, Mrs. Lamb, and her two little children, motored from Palatka Sunday for a day at the shore, visiting St. Augustine Beach. Mrs. Lamb will be remembered by many people here as Miss Mary Tucker, who spent some time in the city prior to her marriage as the guest of her aunts, Mrs. D.L. Dunham and Mrs. J.L. Morgan. Her husband, who is a young lawyer from Live Oak, Florida, is still overseas being a judge advocate at one of the American camps in France. now convalescing. Mrs. J.W. Cast, who has been seriously ill with appendicitis, is now convalescing, which will be pleasing news to her many friends. Mrs. Campbell improving. Mrs. Charles Campbell underwent an operation recently at the Flagler Hospital in St. Augustine and is reported to be recuperating rapidly, the operation having been entirely successful. Mrs. Campbell expects to be able to return to Hastings in about 10 days. I hope you enjoyed this week's edition of Hastings Headline History. This podcast was brought to you by Presenting the Past, bringing history back to the present through historic presentations and the sale of treasures from days gone by. This episode was written and produced by me, Michelle Murillo, with the aid of vintage copies of the Hastings Herald. And to wrap up this week in Hastings Headline History, how about a tune from the time, a 1919 hit, Butterfly is a Fly Gal Now, by Belle Baker.
All alone in her pagoda, waiting for her sailorman, poor butterfly would sit and cry. Someone came along and showed her how to keep him in Japan. She just came back for a day, but she said, I guess you'll stay. Poor little butterfly has learned to roll her eye, and when she shimmies, she's as cute as she can be. Say when this baby shakes, she's got just what it takes to keep her sailor boy from going out to sea. She knew that Golden Jack was bound to bring him back. She learned to do an oriental dance and how, wow, wow, you ought to see the way she shakes her Japanese. Poor little butterfly is a fly gal now. Poor little butterfly no more will sit and cry. She shakes a naughty shoulder in the chivalry, and when she rolls her eyes, you'd really be surprised to think that she was once as shy as she could be. She has a dancing voice, 2 Fords and 1 Rolls Royce, and she has learned to kiss and hug and squeeze, but how? Wow, wow, she used to wear a baby's hair, but now there's paint and powder